Hello, Year 11. Welcome to the second exercise in Chapter 8. We're going to be revising the concept that we covered in Year 10 involving fractional powers. Now, you may or may not remember from last year that we went through this process. We said fractional powers introduce surd signs. And so when you actually, if I work backwards, if I have a surd sign, if there's a number sitting on this little seat out the front of the surd sign, then I have something like x to the power of 3, that can be written in index form, and we say it's x to the power of a fraction. Now, remember, this is our little seat and your bottom sits on a seat, so when I write the fraction, on the bottom of the fraction is a 5, which means on the top of the fraction will be a 3. And it could also be written like this. And that would be exactly the same thing. On the bottom of the seat, bottom of the fraction, sorry, is the seat, 5, and we get that. So remember, whenever you see a power that is a fractional power, it means that we've got some sort of surd happening. And if you have a surd, it can be written as a index or in index form or power form. So you can take something in power form, write it in surd form. You can take something in surd form, write it in power form. Let's get into it. Rightio. First of all, the best thing to do is to memorize to the power of a half means square root. But if you forgot that, you could go, oh, this is the number 4. Because it's got a fractional power, I'm introducing a surd, and on the bottom of the fraction is a 2. So there's a 2 on the seat, and the square root of 4 is 2. Part B, we know the square root matches up with to the power of a half. So this is really a fancy way of saying square root of 100, which is 10. The cube root, well, it's got a fractional power, so I'm going to introduce a surd. But on the bottom of the fraction there is a 3. So sitting on the seat, sitting on your bottom is a 3. Cube root of 8 is 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. We can look at part D and we recognize to the power of 1/3 means cube root. But there's a minus there, so it's 1 over the cube root of 125. You may remember the fractional values, what to do when they are negative from exercise 8a. So, cube root of 125 is 5 times 5 times 5 is 125, so it is 5. There is your answer. Each of those you could have put into the calculator, but it is important that you understand the concept, because later on you could get algebraic scenarios. Now, question 2 is simply just put it into your calculator. So if you do 34 to the power of 1 over 6 on your calculator, you will get 1.799892164. Now this question says to give the answer to 4 decimal places, and to 4 decimal places means we're going to focus on 1, 2, there's 4 decimal places. The next numbers are 9, so we bump it up. So 7998 will become 1.7999. When I look at the next part, it's 300 to the power of 3 over 8. So you put that in your calculator. So I'm just going to do that now. 300 to the power of 3 over 8 equals 8.4902 49845. I want it to 4 decimal places. Looking at the next one, it's a 4, so nothing's going to change in terms of rounding off. 8.4902. So there's your answer. So that's just calculator button pushing. Example 3 says simplify without a calculator. Now you can check your answer with a calculator. There's no problem with that. but we want to understand the process. Now, when we're doing a question like this, 64 to the power of 2/3 becomes, because it's got a power that is fractional, I know it's a surd. Now, on the bottom of the power is 3, which means I have a 3 sitting on the seat and a squared. Now I can put the squared above the 64 or just outside the square root sign, it doesn't matter. The cube root is 64. Now 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So this is a fancy way of saying it's 4 squared. And 4 squared is 16. So there's the answer without a calculator. Question number 3, part B. 25 to the power of 3/2. 3/2 is a fraction, so I know it's going to be 25. Now the bottom of the fraction is a 2, so it's the bottom sits on the seat. Put the 3 there. The square root of 25 is 5, so it becomes 5 cubed. 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. The next one. Now, because there's a 4 over 9, I'm going to think of the 4 and the 9 as separate parts, because everything is raised to the power of 3/2. So I'm actually going to treat this as a fraction. On the top, I've got the square root of 4. Now, on the bottom of the seat, because it's 3/2, will be a 2, and that'll be cubed. On the bottom, I've got a square root of 9. What's going out the front on my surd sign? A 2, because that's on the bottom. 3/2. 3 in. The square root of 4 is 2. And I could figure it out in my head, but I do know 2 cubed is 8, but I'll write this down. Square root of 9 is 3. 2 cubed is 8. 3 cubed is 27. So there's that answer done without a calculator. Part D. 16 over 81 is all to the power of 3/4. 3/4 is a fraction, so I'm going to do the top part separately. I know it's to the power of 3/4, so it introduces a surd. In this case, I have a 4 on the bottom of the fraction, so on the seat out the front is a 4 sitting on your bottom, and it's going to be the power of 3. For the bottom of the fraction, it's 81 with a square root sign. 4 on the seat, 3 up the top. The fourth root of 16. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16, so it's 2. And it'll be cubed. And on the bottom, the fourth root of 81. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 is 81, so it's 3 to the power of 3. And 2 cubed is 8. And 3 cubed is 27. Exactly the same answer as part C. Both of those parts, part C and part D, both end up equaling 8/27. So now let's look at question number 5. And this is where we're going to take surd form and rewrite it in index form. Now, remember when you see a square root sign for 5 part A, there's a 2 out the front. And there's a 1 up there, so if I take that from surd form and write it in index form, on the seat, on the bottom of the fraction is a 2. And you just need to memorize that square root means to the power of a half, which means in part B, square root of 7 is 7 to the power of a half. For part C, I could think of this question as square root 3 times square root of x to the power of 7. And if I do that, 3 is the power of a half because it was a square root 3, and it becomes times x to the power of 7/2, because you need to remember that there is a 2 there. And that's your answer. For part D, the 5 out the front is not under a square root sign, so it will not change. But the A is under a square root sign, so if I change that from surd form to put it into index or power form, it's A to the power of, and when I look at it, on the seat is a 3, so your bottom sits on the seat, so bottom of the fraction should have a 3, so it becomes 4/3. Go to part E. Part E becomes the 5 out the front is just 5. Square root of 5 is 5 to the power of a half, because square root means to the power of a half. And when you're multiplying, if the base numbers are the same, and they are in this question, you plus the powers. 1 plus a half is 1 1/2. And when we're doing indices, 1 1/2, we write as an improper fraction, which is 3/2. Part F, when I look at this question here, it's 1 over x to the power of, now on the bottom of the fraction is going to be a 3 because it's sitting on the seat out the front. The top of the fraction will be a 5, and that could also be written as x to the power of negative 5/3, because I can take the bottom of the fraction, move it to the top, and the cost is the power has to change its sign. Time for you to do some questions. Enjoy the experience as always. Bye for now.